Yeah. Be a few minutes. So if anybody has questions or comments, go ahead and add them to the comment section for this post. We'll see if I can get to them. I have a lot of questions for this week, a lot of things to go through, so we'll see how much I can get to. But definitely, if you have things and I don't answer them today, I'll respond back or bring them up again next week. So it'll just be a few minutes for those who are joining right now. It'll just be a few more minutes. If you have questions, comments, just add them to the comment section for this post, and I'll see if I can answer them before the end of today's virtual meeting. We're just about ready to get started. Let's see. Okay, we're just about ready. Okay, everyone, welcome, Sunnyvale. Good morning. It's 9:06, so we've just paused for a few moments to get started. My name is Larry Klein. I'm Sunnyvale's mayor. Last week we had the first virtual office hours, and they went very well. People really appreciated the info that I passed, and I got a lot of subsequent questions and comments, so happy to do this again while we remain under shelter in place. I'll probably be doing this every week, it looks like. This is a trying time for everybody. A lot of anxiety out there for a lot of people, especially how quickly things have changed. And I'm hoping that these virtual office hours really help people understand what's happening in our community, figure out where to get help, and get some ideas on how to shelter in place. The pandemic is really requiring all of us to take unprecedented actions as far as staying at home or how we do our grocery shopping, how we interface with others. And this is hopefully helping a certain portion of our residents. We're only about 10 days, and I know it seems like a whole bunch more, but 10 days after the March 16th public health order for the 6 counties to shelter in place to reduce the spread of COVID-19. You know, while activity, travel, business functions are limited, all the essential services remain available, and I'll be talking about those a little bit later. Since the declaration last week, a lot has happened. You know, I've have 2 or more conference calls or press briefings daily with the federal government, with the state government, with the county government, phone calls with city staff. It's a very busy time to be a mayor, but it's trying to stay on top of the ever-changing rules that are happening out there. And so I'll start this meeting off with kind of just giving some of that information as far as what's actually changed in the last week. So first, the 7th Bay Area County has joined that shelter-in-place declaration. So now when you're getting those updates, you're also seeing those counties, all the health directors from each of the counties actually speak about what's being changed as rules continue to change. Right now, it is a very, a similar shelter in place from at least the Bay Area. On last week, Newsom also declared a statewide shelter in place. Definitely our restrictions are more prohibitive from a county level. And so that's really important. Those are the rules that we're mainly focusing on. On Monday, Santa Clara County officials unveiled an emergency fund to help low families pay for rent and basic needs during the COVID-19 crisis. This is also being done in conjunction with Silicon Valley Strong effort that I talked about last week. So thanks to multiple companies, high-tech companies that donated the beginning of an $11 million fund that's now grown more. Sacred Heart Community Services will be administrating the fund in conjunction with the homeless prevention system partners around the county. And so eligible households can receive up to $4,000, and to apply, you need to go to sacredheartscs.org/COVID-19 or call 408-780-9134. And this is all for basically low-income prevention, or to deal with people that have been affected either from a health or work standpoint. From low-income households, your household income must be less than 80% of the average median income, the AMI. So that kind of starts at $72,000 for a one-person household, and it basically increases depending upon how many people are in your household. So contact Sacred Hearts to find out how to apply for that. But that is just one of these Silicon Valley Strong efforts that are happening. One is a volunteer program, one is a food distribution program, and lastly, of course, is direct monetary distributions to those that actually need it. And then on Tuesday, the county supervisors passed a ban to protect residential and business renters. So that was a moratorium on evictions, and that took place immediately. So the board determined that it was good to prohibit evictions through the end of May, so May 31st, for both residential and businesses that have been affected by the impact of COVID-19. And so, that failure to pay rent, and understand that these are very difficult times for both the residents and the landlords, but the county supervisors made that action for not just the unincorporated portions of the county, but all 15 cities also. So it's to reduce the number of evictions, and as a council member, I've been getting a lot of requests and a lot of questions exactly about this. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the city is doing, because the city actually has something at Tuesday's meeting to basically re-emphasize what's being done at the county level. But these measures basically, because of COVID-19 and people that are being affected by job loss, reduced work hours, business closures because of they're not an essential business, or reduced open hours, medical expenses, all of these affect the reason why you can't pay your rent. And so once the moratorium's over, tenants have 120 days to pay all the rent that's due. So that's been done at a county level. And then any landlord who attempts to carry out evictions is in violation of the county's ban, and they face civil fines and or penalties. So this is to protect both the businesses and the residents living in our community that are currently renting. And the other portion of that measure was that owners may not charge or collect a late fee for rent that is delayed during the ordinance for that 120 days. So that's the other thing. If people can't pay their rent because of COVID-19 and how that is affecting their business or their family, there's also can't be late penalties because of that. And then on Wednesday, Governor Newsom announced that most banks have agreed to allow customers to miss their mortgage payments for the next 90 days if they were affected by basically the homeowner was affected by the coronavirus outbreak. So that list of banks is ever growing, and so I'm not going to give that list here. There are multiple resources online. Contact your mortgage lender to find out what they're doing. But that was, the governor realizing that just not the renters, but those paying mortgages are ultimately affected by what's going on. And then on Wednesday, Bay Area counties extended school closures for public and private schools until May 1st with possible extensions. So that's a big deal, of course, for all the parents out there. Definitely, it's homeschooling, it's figuring out the best way to teach your kids during this time of shelter in place. It's not an easy sort of thing. A lot of the schools are working with virtual classrooms. Some of the schools have passed out, Chromebooks or other media to make sure that those that don't have access to a laptop or something of that nature also have ways to get online and actually get coursework from the different schools. So contact your school on what they're doing. But that was, that to me is taking us all the way through April, and this is kind of a reflection on, in my mind, on how quickly things will turn around. At this point, we're at least till the beginning of May. But we'll see how things go. Definitely as we quickly, close things down, we'll conceivably ramp things up and slowly open things up. But right now, at least for schools, things are closed until the beginning of May. And then earlier this week, federal, state, local coordinators toured the Santa Clara Convention Center to figure out how to start converting it into one of the 8 statewide medical centers that will deal with coronavirus or non-coronavirus patients, depending upon how that is ultimately structured. The facility is about 300,000 square feet, so it will serve as non-trauma cases, but it's really to help prevent hospitals from getting overrun, and then by patients. As the number of COVID-19 cases continues to grow. So this is basically, and we'll figure out how, depending upon how quickly it grows and how our hospitals are responding in this critical time, from an ICU standpoint for the number of beds, how quickly we end up turning that on from a alternate for the Bay Area. From a transportation standpoint, earlier this week, VTA, Caltrain, BART, they all reduced services because the levels have dropped dramatically. The number of people, because of people sheltering in place, the number of people actually utilizing public transportation has dropped, amazingly low. And because of that, their service levels, there's no reason to run as frequent service levels, and so they reduced service levels accordingly. And then, of course, yesterday, all light rail service was suspended indefinitely. That notice went out yesterday because an operator trainee tested positive for COVID-19. So, we'll see what this week holds, but there was a lot of things happening over the last week, and so, it's going to be this way for a while. Don't panic. This is critical. It is ever changing. It's hard to stay up to date, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these weekly office hours, because it's important that people have at least one source, and whether or not you're watching it live right now, you can forward this to your friends. People, I've had a lot of people throughout the last week talk about, oh, I'm glad to hear this, because part of the issue right now is not seeing people's faces. It's like some people are going out, and we'll talk about that too, but seeing a friendly face and hearing what's going on, the news is a little dire and dramatic, and cutting it down to the kind of the base information of how our community reacts is really important. So let's talk about what Sunnyvale is doing in response to the coronavirus. So, the county measures, the state measures are affecting all of us. And because of that, we're having to take, unprecedented actions to control that spread. So 2 weeks ago, Sunnyvale activated our Emergency Operations Center to manage the response. Council on March 17th, we ratified a local state of emergency, and then we basically authorized a $250,000 grant to Sunnyvale Community Services as a first step to help people pay for rent, pay for food, all of those sorts of things that Sunnyvale Community Services does so well. They provide the funds for emergency rent, utility bills, food, and then from an operational standpoint, they're still distributing food to families on a weekly basis. This is the heart and soul of Sunnyvale. This is actually Sunnyvale Community Services' 50th year, and with what's going on, there probably won't be a celebration, but it's important that if you can donate, consider donating to Sunnyvale Community Services because of what they're doing in our community. And this is Sunnyvale Council provided this first grant to them. They're also getting trying to get money from the county, from a regional standpoint, and support from a regional standpoint. And I can easily see that the council, may add. One of the questions that I always get are how city services are changing. So, our city staff is doing a great job. They've modified services necessary to meet the essential needs of the community, still comply with the new public health restrictions. And I want to assure you, as I did last week, that we continue to provide essential services to our city residents. Our public safety personnel is out there and ready to help. I spent some time talking to several of them earlier this week about, how many calls they're getting, how they're dealing with, the stress. And a lot of people are stressed at home, and, there are not as many calls during the day, not as many traffic accidents, not as many fires, but as it gets into the evening hours, people's minds often ramp up and they have issues or questions or concerns about their health. So there's been a lot of calls as we get into the evening hours. So try to remain calm. Definitely, if you're calling public safety about an issue, if you think you've been exposed or someone in your house has COVID-19, definitely tell the dispatcher. That's one of the things that they'll be asking, but that's one of the things to keep in mind to reduce the exposure. We all saw what happened in San Jose 2 weeks ago when multiple fire personnel had to stay at home because a whole fire department had been exposed to COVID-19 and it had spread from person to person. Other city services, the city workers are making sure our utilities like water, sewer, garage collection are fully operational. So people haven't seen any change as far as that's concerned. And as we talk about sewer, I just wanted to bring up something early on that went out as a request, just to remind people that one of the things that they can't do is flush the disinfecting wipes. So pipes down the drain, pipes that are flushed down to the wastewater are clogging sinks or clogging toilets. They're conceivably clogging sewer drains throughout the city. We haven't had any issues yet, although we've had a few partial clogging, but I've seen photos from around the US where so many people are flushing these disinfecting wipes that it causes issues. Please put all your wipes, even those that are labeled as flushable, and paper towels in the garbage only. It's better for your sewage system, it's better for the city's sewage system. And then, and this is an ongoing thing, grease. So if you're cooking at home and you have grease, don't put it into the garbage, or put it into the garbage instead of putting it down the sink. That's also something that continues to build over time. And so that's one of the main reasons why our food cycle cart, for those people in single-family homes, and we're looking to try to do that for multifamily residents too, apartments and condos. But people in single-family homes, put that into a plastic bag and put it into your food cycle cart. But yeah, so that's city services as far as sewer and water and garbage collection. Those continue unabated, and that is really important. That being said, one of the things that we did close down for this weekend is the free waste day. So the free dump weekend has been canceled. I think that was supposed to be this weekend. So we'll be postponing this until after the COVID-19 shelter in place. And then from that standpoint, we'll be looking, once the shelter in place is lifted, there's a lot of work that we need to do as far as community outreach and other things that will be changing from and be reinstated from a city standpoint. Next question. What should I be doing? What should I do during the pandemic? And as I said last week, reminding people, only call 911 if you have a life-threatening emergency. There's no reason to panic. As we talked about it, stay at home the majority of your time. Most of the companies have changed things to make it so that people work at home. And then Governor Newsom, expanded that, but right now, self-isolate as much as possible. That's the best way to reduce the spread of the virus. And then, as I keep telling people, please wash your hands. People might be tired of hearing about it, but it is the best way to actually reduce the spread of the virus. As the virus is on hard objects, and this is the hard thing, it does stay on solid objects for a while. So making sure that you clean your hands whenever you touch anything, when you go out to shop, and make sure you practice safe social distancing, at least maintaining that 6-foot distance when you're talking to people. When you're out, that's really important. And so from that standpoint, Also, when you're going through the grocery store, collecting things, what I always do is before I go into the store, I wash my hands with basically disinfectant, and then as soon as I come out, do the same thing before you head back to your car. And then also, it's really critical to check in with your neighbors right now and make sure that they're okay. There's a lot of people staying at home, and I've called a lot of people that I see at the coffee shop. We have a large, because my weekly office hours are normally at Bean Scene Cafe on Murphy Avenue. I see a lot of people on a weekly basis, and you've lost, because of the shelter in place, you've lost that connection. So reach out to them. I've reached out to multiple people this week, and just to make sure that they're okay, if they need anything. And then just remember to be kind and be generous. And when you're out, it's important to smile. It's like if you're taking a walk around the block, smile and wave. You can that social interaction, or that lack of social interaction that we're having right now, really affects people. And so making sure, just saying hi to others, whether or not it's across the street or whatever, actually is useful and does kind of help people's day. And then just the big thing is, please be patient. This is an enormous challenge that we're all facing. These are unprecedented times, as far as from a city and state and a federal level. We never thought, that things would change so rapidly. It's hard to believe that order, the county order, just went in 10 days ago. With the number of meetings and the number of questions and how your life has changed. It seems like at least a month ago at this point, but it's really been a very short period of time. And so, whatever you can do, if you have questions, email them to me, contact city staff. We'll talk about, what to do if you have to shelter in place and have been exposed or are conceivably worried about being infected. If you're at risk and shouldn't be out, there are plenty of ways to actually get services that you need. So, that was my next area. I'm sheltering in place and am high risk of contacting the flu. I need assistance in getting food or medication. What can I do? So if you need help related to the shelter in place order, if you need someone to pick up your groceries or prescriptions, there are multiple ways of getting that done. So first, the city of Sunnyvale is basically redistributed a certain amount of their workforce just to do that exact thing. So you can call them at 408-730-7360 between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And city staff will respond as quickly as possible on what your needs are. And they've actually been calling out to the people that are signed up at the senior center just to make sure that they're okay and whether or not they need anything. You can also put in a request on the Access Sunnyvale link on our city website to submit an inquiry. So this link is at the top of the page of sunnyvale.ca.gov. And also at the top of that page, you'll see an update from the city, which basically leads you to all of our coronavirus information. So what you need to do is, if you just want to go there directly, is to go to sunnyvale.ca.gov/virus. And that has all the information that you might need, answering a lot of these questions, as well as a whole bunch more about what services, how to get services, what you can do beyond what the city's providing. There are several Nextdoor groups that have been formed just to help people in a local neighborhood. So these are now groups of 50, 100 people, volunteers that are going out to buy people's groceries and bring them back for for people that are sheltering in place, picking up people's medications, all of those sorts of things. I've posted about them on my Sunnyvale Mayor Facebook page earlier this week. I'll be putting out kind of a compendium list of everything, from my standpoint that's important, but that's an important thing. It's neighbors basically getting together to help other Sunnyvale residents, and it really makes my heart grow as far as how important that is, because it shows what the character of our community really is. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and it might be a completely different portion of the city, but they're willing to go out and do whatever it is for those people in need. One of the big questions I keep getting is, what are essential services? And from an essential service standpoint, the county had a fairly long list of what essential services means. And I'll kind of go through these because there are some questions that people keep asking me either through mail or through text on what happens if I don't think this specific company is essential. And there's a long list of companies and what the exemptions are for those people that are sheltering in place. And so you can go to the county health order, but I'll go through some of the important ones here, because that will kind of get rid of some of the questions that people have been asking. First, healthcare operations. Definitely right now, our doctors, our nurses, our clinics, our hospitals are critical. Making sure that we reduce the spread or handle cases that are coming in is really important. If you have extra face masks, gloves, the VMC Foundation is out there collecting and distributing to hospitals. Contact your favorite hospital directly. If you've collected, when all this started, a lot of anything more than you could ever use, consider donating it to your local hospital. Essential infrastructure. So if you see work that is still happening on roads, the Matilda Monster is still partially under construction from a Caltrans standpoint, but that is really important. Grocery stores, getting your food is important, and I thank all the different grocery stores and convenience stores that have set up senior hours. So depending upon what the different grocery stores are, Zanotto's was one of the first ones to do it. 8 to 9 a.m. every morning is senior hour, but pretty much the majority of the stores now have at least 1 or 2 or multiple days a week where they're setting aside certain hours for either seniors to come in alone, or even basically setting up by appointment hours during off hours. Certified farmers markets, definitely if you can get out, go to the farmers markets. They are considered essential by the county. That's really important because a lot of these local producers don't have a stream to give their supply food to stores. So they don't produce enough that a Safeway or a Lucky would actually take their food. And so going out and buying locally produced food regionally at the farmers markets is really, really important. And so try to do that. Food banks, of course, are open. And then convenience stores that sell food as well as pet supplies. So our pets need their food also, and our vets are open. Those are also critical and essential items during this time. And then as far as convenience stores, you also see corner stores. Even though, as long as they're selling grocery foods, basically that helps maintain the safety and essential operation that people need. So the corner store, the Target, all those are actually really important. Businesses that provide food, shelter, social services are of course open. Newspapers, televisions, radio and other media services are open. Gas stations, auto supply and auto repair, people still need to get around. Banks, hardware stores, so definitely, Lowe's, Home Depot are open. Plumbers, electricians, exterminators, basically that's critical services. Mailing, laundromats, dry cleaners, restaurants, and other facilities to prepare in food for takeout or delivery, they're all open. Schools and other entities that typically provide free food to students, they continue to do so. And I visited, Bishop Elementary, I think, it was last week at this point, to thank the people. They're still providing free school lunches to kids under 18, and that's Bishop Elementary. That's basically Sunnyvale School District. That's Santa Clara Unified. That's most of the school districts that were already providing lunches have continued to maintain that program. And thanks to all the volunteers, to the teachers, to the administration that made sure that program continues. Airlines, taxis, private transportation providers are still providing transportation, and then home-based care for seniors, adults, and children is still happening. And so that's a long list, and that's just a partial list of everything that is exempted, is considered exempted from shelter in place, and is definitely seen as critical during these times. But definitely local businesses need your help. What I've been doing, and I've gotten a lot of people thanking me for it, not just the owners, but every day I'm going to a different local restaurant to have takeout, to highlight that they're still open, that they're either providing delivery or takeout. So if you have a suggested restaurant or a favorite dish, definitely please send them to me. This is one of the things that I've discovered a few new restaurants, but right now, visiting a different restaurant every day, the owners, the people working there, they're very appreciative. Tip well. Definitely, these are very dire times for small businesses, and whatever you can do to help support them is really important. And one of the local businesses, not a restaurant, that is actually also doing deliveries is Lee's Books in Bookosaurus. It's our last independent bookstore here in Sunnyvale, but they're actually doing deliveries for items or for orders over $20. So go take a look at Lee's Books online or call them directly, and basically they will give you a list of online. They have books for adults. They also and children. Of course, they also have games. So if your child is trying to find other things to do, they have games. They have toys. They have a lot of other things that will be delivered. And helping those local businesses is really critical right now. So I'm sheltering in place. What can I do to pass the time? So definitely sheltering in place can be very stressful, and everyone needs to remember to take breaks. Spend time in your backyard, walk around the block, bike, hike, but just maintain that 6-foot distance when you're dealing with others. And besides the streaming services, Hulu, Netflix, you can listen to podcasts, but try not to be a news junkie. That can only add to your stress, as you're hearing what's happening around the world, around the country, around our county. It's important to stay informed, but if you focus too much on that news, that can actually be bad for your emotional stability. So, definitely what you can do, try to refocus refocus on what's happening in the world. So one of the things you can do, as I said last week, was fill out your Census 2020 form. So April 1st is Census Day, and I've already been, in contact with the people running the census in the county. And, how they will do outreach. So they're trying to make sure that everybody by April 1st fills out their census form and sends it in, and that can be done either online or by calling. But after Wednesday, April 1st, and that's the big deadline, then census workers will start working to try to go out in the community, and under the COVID-19 efforts, it'll be figuring out how to best do that. And so they're looking at changing those procedures appropriately. I talked about the Sunnyvale Active Transportation Plan last week. The comment period has been extended to April 19th, and this basically addresses bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school plan for Sunnyvale. And so if you want to do that, you can go to home, sunnyvale.ca.gov, home, news, current topics, active transportation plan, and you can online or via email, you can send information, send comments, send feedback to city staff on changes that you'd like to see. One of the things that you can do is apply for boards and commissions. So I posted about that earlier this week. We currently have 17 different boards and commission positions that are open. So if you go to sunnyvale.ca.gov and search for boards and commissions, or take a look at the post that I did earlier this week, then you will get a chance to apply. And if you don't meet the current date is the end of April, to receive those applications. If you miss that date, then then we actually keep your applications on file for the next period. We do a quarterly interview for positions to fill positions on our boards and commissions. If you're an active crocheter or knitter, there's the Cozy Caps campaign. So if you go to Facebook and search for that, it's basically for people doing sewing or doing knitting and crocheting to do warm hats for people in need. And then those are distributed around the city and around the county. Reading a book, there's lots of either your own book, there's little free library books around the city. There's also online books that are available through the Sunnyvale Public Library, as well as multiple services that have made lots of books free. So take a look, on that from a news standpoint, or contact me. And then also considering doing a virtual book club meeting. That conference call, using a conference call feature, still allows people to talk about this and carry on what I'll say is their normal operation in this time of the pandemic. Learn to cook, try a new recipe. My wife is making 2 loaves of bread every day or every other day, and I've been distributing those around the city. So I'm slowly passing those out to different people. Basically, and that's one of her ways to relieve stress is to bake. And so cooking, baking, other things you could do is repair those items that are broken, that have been sitting in your home for a while now. You finally conceivably have the time to do some of those things. Mend clothes, do a deep cleaning of the house. It is spring, although all of us are staying inside. Spring started last week, and so definitely think about that. Organize, declutter your closets, drawers, shelves. Gardening. So it is time for that spring planting. Lowe's, as I said previously, Lowe's and Home Depot are open. They're considered essential services. So, going out and buying, those tomatoes, getting ready for summer. This is the time to do it. Working in the backyard, working out in the sun. It might be a little chilly today, but conceivably it's a way to pass the time, and also cook food for yourself, which is really healthy. One thing that you can also do is learn to do something that you've always wanted to learn. Play an instrument, sing, draw, paint. There's so much available online and available for free. So either take a look at YouTube University. There's depending on what you want to do, there's lots of resources available for you to try out something new. And then making sure that you exercise. So don't just sit in front of the couch and watch the news, watch the TV. go for a walk. There's lots of yoga and Pilates and dance classes online that are available to people. And then conceivably, looking past when we get through the pandemic shelter in place, plan your next trip, tour the world from your home, research those places that you might want to visit sometime in the future. There's multiple museums that have virtual tours. I watched, I did a tour of several museums like the Louvre exhibit last week. The Monterey Bay Aquarium has live cams. San Diego Zoo has live cams. So there's a lot of online cameras, video cameras, streaming interesting things to see. Write a letter or thank you card to somebody that you haven't contacted for a while. It's a great way to reconnect, and people appreciate the time that you spent actually writing that, but also just calling a friend, and better yet, even making it a FaceTime call. So to see somebody's face that you haven't seen for a while, or that you might have seen 2 weeks ago, but you can't see right now because everybody's sheltering in place. That actually helps, brighten somebody's day at the end of the day. Another question that I got is, I want to volunteer. What can I do to help? So I've already talked about several of those. There's Nextdoor groups that have been created to distribute food to help people pick up medication. There's a Senior Warriors for Project Joy Facebook group that you can go visit. The city is also, taking volunteers. So we have our CERT volunteers that are helping doing food distribution, medical pickup. If you go to the Sunnyvale shelter-in-place volunteer site link, and I'll post about that later. Sunnyvale is happy to have citizens willing to volunteer during this time, and so if you're willing to help, there's a place to sign up online, and ultimately people will, the city will contact you in figuring out how to best use your abilities. Sunnyvale Community Services, if you're interested in volunteering for them, they have a volunteer interest tab on their page, so definitely go to Sunnyvale Community Services. They're always needing help. And if you're in good health and you can also give blood, one of the big things is the Red Cross, and basically we have a shortage of blood right now. So I gave blood earlier this week to the Red Cross, and March is actually National Red Cross Month, and we were going to declare that at our last council meeting, and we ended up basically reducing the meeting to only those essential items. But it's important. If you're in good health and you haven't given blood for the last 8 weeks, please consider going to the Red Cross. Contact them and schedule an appointment. They're only doing things by appointment. There are some drop-ins, but all their mobile blood mobiles have shut down. They're only doing it at fixed points, so those that they always give, that you can always give blood to. So I went down to San Jose at First Street 3 days ago and gave blood. It's important that we make sure that we have that blood supply. And then other questions. How can you protect renters in this difficult time? I'm concerned about being able to pay for my rent next month. And so, as mayor, I agendized something for this upcoming Tuesday's meeting, and this will be basically staff coming back with different measures that we'll be talking about. That being said, the county is already done a certain amount of that, and so one of the things is figuring out from a city standpoint whether or not we extend the amount of payback time beyond the 120 days. Do we want to clarify to make sure that from a renting standpoint it applies to mobile homes? There's some other questions that need to be resolved, and so that's one of the things that we'll be discussing at a virtual meeting. So we'll have a similar virtual meeting from a council standpoint on Tuesday night. One of the questions I had is what's happening at the shelter. So that's, part of my duties is checking with the county supervisors and of course Sunnyvale Community Services. A lot of people don't know that we actually have a shelter here in Sunnyvale. So we have, it used to be 125 bed cold weather shelter. So it used to be only open between October and April. One of the things that I talked to the county supervisors about, and we tried a pilot program, and right now it's gone to a year-round shelter. One of the specific things about the Sunnyvale shelter is it's referral only, as opposed to a drop-in shelter where people just show up. People are guaranteed to have beds for the entire time that they've been referred. So there are people referred to the shelter through the different county services, through Sunnyvale Community Services, and they're guaranteed to have a bed there every night unless they don't show up for an extended period of time. And so that has now been expanded from 125 to 175 beds, so that was already in the process. But the big thing right now is that they're open 24 hours a day. Normally it was just for sheltering overnight, and then kids went to school, and parents or other people basically had to leave the shelter because the majority of other things are closed. Basically, it's open for 24 hours a day, and the county continues to provide those services. They're having a lot of food delivered, mainly because a lot of the neighborhoods used to provide food, and so that's changed a little bit. But definitely the shelter's doing fine. I've got some things to drop off there for some of the kids. But it's important that continues, because making sure that people that are trying to find homes, that are trying to find permanent homes, have a place to stay during these cold nights. And the county's looking at what they can do for additional shelters across the county. One of the questions I get is, why do I see construction still going on? One of the exemptions that I didn't mention is residential construction is still allowed. So I saw construction at the old Denny's site at the corner of Matilda and McKinley. That started earlier this week. City Line is still working on the new apartment building along Iowa and TAFE. So you'll see, construction at a larger scale, as well as home remodels still going on, from a city standpoint, and from a county standpoint, residential construction, making sure that if we're building homes, they're still, finding places for people to live is really critical. Let's see. Let me get to a few of the questions. Let's see, and I mentioned, are free dump weekends canceled? Yes, they are, and we'll be rescheduling those. What else? How are hotels that are still open able to help? So definitely the county and the city are looking at conceivably utilizing the hotels for some of the public safety, for some of the doctors and nurses, and so the county is basically taking that lead for a lot of those operations. So that's one of the things that definitely the hotels can be doing. Let's see. One of the questions that I got was, should landlord, property owner, management companies have workers coming in to work on properties, apartments, to get them ready to rent? So right now, and that's what I said, is making sure that residential construction still goes on, whether or not that's a remodel, whether or not that's painting, making sure that if somebody moved out or somebody's doing a kitchen remodel, not having a kitchen right now is pretty essential for somebody that might need a kitchen. They need to cook at home, and finishing those efforts is pretty important. Now, the city isn't doing new permitting, so it's not starting anything, but if you were previously permitted to do work, the city is continuing that. and it's still scheduling inspectors to come out and review things as needed as things finish, but operation from a residential standpoint, from an apartment standpoint, is still going on. And then thank you for continuing to keep the community informed. Can you post this video on Sunnyvale website or some other place for lots of people who do not have a Facebook account to see? Well, actually, I will be posting this on Nextdoor. I forward that to a few other people. People don't need actually to have a Facebook account to actually see this video. And I appreciate those who actually went through the video and watched it. But if just doing the link, and I'll post that link and make sure that people can see it. If you just have that link, you don't actually need to be logged into Facebook. You don't need a Facebook account. You can actually just watch that video and also see kind of some of my shelter-in-place suggestions. Those links I've been passing to different groups because exactly that. People are a little afraid of Facebook, but it's actually very good for these sorts of things, for these conference calls, as opposed to setting up other services. I've sat through several county town halls earlier this week, and they're not used to dealing with setting up different services and making sure that people are muted and all that. This is actually, I know it's one directional other than the text comments that I'm getting, but it's actually a good way to answer some of those questions, to show what's happening in our city. But it can actually be helpful from that standpoint. But you don't just need Facebook. And as much as Facebook has its good and bad items, it's actually very useful from that standpoint. So people can actually, hear this video without, actually logging into Facebook. One of the questions is, where can I get a corona test? Well, hopefully, and a lot of people might have heard the news that one of the Sunnyvale companies, Cepheid, just got approved, a fast track approval from the FDA to have basically a home test that's available. And so they're working on that right now. And so that will be, they're working to get that into production for larger distribution. If you need a basically a COVID-19 coronavirus test, contact, the county. Not everybody needs it. If you think that you're sick, contact your local health professional, give them your symptoms, and they will make that decision on whether or not you should come in for testing. But right now, one of the issues with testing is it's being shipped out, and they're trying to improve how that testing is done so that it can be conceivably, done in home and then shipped to the hospital. So that's important. And then let's see, and that's pretty much it. It's 10 o'clock, and it's time for me to wrap up. Let's see, do I have any final question? No, I think I've gotten to most of the questions. If you have other questions, if you have other comments, if you have ideas, email them to me, or just add that comment on the Facebook page. But I just want to thank everybody for joining me today. Definitely, this is useful for me as well as other people. It's trying to get the message out that Sunnyvale is in fairly good shape. It's like, I understand that people can worry, but we're dealing with the issues, and neighborhoods are banding together. This pandemic puts everything into perspective. I've already seen Sunnyvale residents pull together to help those in need, to help those in the community, to help those citywide, and that's really endearing. And we will emerge from this, I think, conceivably stronger as a community. I think bonds are being made. New groups are joining together to help out, and that only makes us better in the long run. So just to remind you, we are all in this together, and we will all get through this together. thanks for listening. And until next week, everyone stay safe and thank you. Have a good day.